Hello, Network to Code community. My name is Tim Fiola. I'm a developer advocate here at Network to Code. Hope your day is going awesome. Today we're going to do a Nautobot device onboarding plugin overview and then a demo to get it up and running. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the agenda. This video will follow. We'll talk about what is the Nautobot device onboarding plugin, what does it do, how does it alter the device onboarding process, how does it improve your life. We'll talk about the onboarding plugin mechanics. We'll talk about how Napalm fits into this. And then we'll do a demo for plugin installation and then device onboarding. And because we are network to code and automation is in our DNA, one of the items we'll be demoing is the programmatic onboarding of a device. I'll run a Python script and walk you through what's going on so you can see how to programmatically onboard your devices into Nautobot. So stay tuned for that. What does the Nautobot device onboarding plugin do? It gathers information from deployed network elements and then populates that information into Nautobot. The plugin uses Napalm to interact with those network devices. So let's talk about how this affects what you do as a user, how this saves you time. So for the typical onboarding process for a device, the user would specify the device name, the site, the type, model, the role, the platform, the manufacturer, management interface, management IP, and serial number if that was desired. Okay, that's the traditional way to do it. With the onboarding plugin, during the onboarding process, the user has to specify a name and a site, and in some cases, a platform and a transport. And then the Nautobot onboarding plugin does the rest. It'll discover the device type. It'll discover the device role. Well, actually, it'll default the device role to network. It will discover the platform and create it automatically in Nautobot if it's not defined in Nautobot already. It will discover the manufacturer, and if the manufacturer is not in Nautobot already, it'll define that manufacturer in Nautobot. It'll discover the management interface. It'll discover the management interface IP, and when possible and available, the serial number for the device. It'll put all that information into Nautobot. All the user has to do is specify a couple items, then Nautobot device onboarding plugin takes it from there. Let's talk about the device onboarding plugin mechanics at a high level. What it does is it'll detect the platform type using SSH. It'll then select the correct Napalm driver based on the platform type to interact with the device, and then it'll use that Napalm driver to log into the device and gather the information. Let's talk about the Napalm credentials a second here. So the onboarding plugin will look for the Napalm credentials in two locations. The first location is the configuration file. It'll look for the Napalm username and Napalm password values in that configuration file. And if these are defined, awesome. You don't need to specify them in the onboarding task. The second place it'll look is in the onboarding task itself. There are username and password fields in the onboarding task. If you don't have those values specified in the configuration file, or if you want to override them for a specific onboarding task, you would specify the username and password fields in the onboarding task. And I know that was a lot of information we just covered there, but don't worry, because we're going to demo all of this from installation, configuration, all the way to onboarding tasks. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the installation of the plugin. On my screen right now, you see the Nautobot server web UI. You can see right here that there's no data in the database at this point. It's completely empty, and no plugins are installed either. Okay, let's go ahead and switch over to the terminal and do the actual installation. Okay, it's a simple pip3 install of Nautobot Device Onboarding. Okay, there we go. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the device onboarding plugin to our local requirements file. So in case we upgrade, the plugin will be upgraded as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll go ahead and just take a look at that file to make sure it is what we think it is. If we cat the local requirements file, we see Napalm and Nautobot device onboarding, which is what we want. Now that we've installed the plugin, we need to go configure Nautobot to use the plugin. And we do that in the nautobot config.py file. So back in the terminal here, I am the Nautobot user, and I am in the Nautobot root directory, which in my case is opt Nautobot. Yours may vary. Regardless, we need to go into the Nautobot config py file in that Nautobot root directory and make a couple edits. So the first thing we'll do is we'll head down to, we'll search for Napalm. Okay, and there's two areas we're going to configure here in the Napalm section. We're going to configure the Napalm user and the Napalm password. So my Napalm user is going to be NTC and my Napalm password is going to be NTC123. So now we've configured the Napalm username and password. The next thing we need to do is we need to enable the actual plugin here. So in this plugins list, we're going to add Nautobot Device Onboarding. Let me go ahead and clean up my quotes here. All right. Now we've added Nautobot Device Onboarding to the list of plugins Nautobot can use. So with that, we'll go ahead and exit out of here. There are a couple more steps we need to do to make this work. The first one is to do a Nautobot server migration. So from the Nautobot command line as the Nautobot user, go ahead and do a Nautobot server and then migrate. Great. And then as a user, again with super user sudo access, we need to restart the Nautobot worker and the Nautobot processes. All right, there we go. Now we're ready to start onboarding devices. All right, let's get to adding devices now. The first device we're going to add is a Juniper Junos device. So a couple things before we do that. First of all, notice that I've added a couple of sites. In order to add a device, you need to add a site first. So I've gone ahead and added a few separate sites that we can use to add devices to. From here, go ahead and up to the plugins menu and notice that the device onboarding plugin is now available and we have an onboarding tasks section. Go ahead and click on onboarding tasks. This takes us to the general onboarding tasks screen where we can see logs and other activity for onboarding. Go ahead right now and click on add. Go ahead and select the appropriate site. And I am going to add a Juniper VMX device. And I am going to go ahead and use the DNS name because I have DNS working. If you don't have DNS working, it needs to be an IP address. But this is it. We've added a site and an IP address. We can leave the default port at 22 and the timeout at 30. And the username and password down here, we don't have to provide these if we're using the username and password that we configured in the nautobot config.py file for Napalm. So we will go ahead and leave these blank, and here we go. So you'll come to the status screen here, and if we refresh a couple times, the onboarding has succeeded. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what we added and give it a shot here. So if we go to devices, we have one device here. It's called VMX. Let's look and see what the add-on, let's look and see what the device onboarding plugin added. So click on VMX1. We see here up at the top, the site is BKK, which we assigned when we created the device. But the rest of this is all created by the onboarding plugin. Let's take a look. The device type, Juniper VMX. The device serial number. The role, network. It defaults to network. The platform, Juniper Junos. If we go to the interfaces tab, we have the management interface, and here's the IP address of the management interface. And I have a interesting lab setup, let's say that. So the management interface came through as a placeholder. And if we go back to the device tab, and if we click on the device type, that takes us to Juniper VMX, and the manufacturer is Juniper, which was also created by the onboarding plugin. So the onboarding plugin created 7 pieces of data during this device instantiation. All we had to do was assign a device a name and give it and tell the onboarding plugin the IP address, and the onboarding plugin went ahead and did all this other discovery here. Okay, great. So we're ready to move on to the next device onboarding example. Let's continue our device onboarding. We're going to add a couple of IOS-XE devices. So go up to our menu bar, go to Plugins, Onboarding Tasks, go ahead and click on that. And instead of hitting Add this time to add an individual device, we're going to go to Import. And there's a really cool use case for import. Import lets you use CSV data to bulk import many devices. Notice that up here in the CSV data form, there are 2 column headers right now. One is site and one is IP address. And we are going to use just those for now. So the first device we're going to onboard is going to be in Denver, and it's going to be CSR1. And again, I am using my DNS names that will resolve to IP addresses. If that is not the case for you, you will need to use the IP address. So I'll use Denver for CSR1 and also do Den CSR2. And you can add many, many more devices down here as well. I'm just going to use 2. So go ahead and do that, and then go ahead and click on Submit. But before we do that, take note that we've added for our column headers that were there were site and IP address, and all we've added so far has been site and IP address or resolvable DNS name. So we're adding 2 devices with this information. Go ahead and click Submit, and go ahead and click on View All. And these are the status of the tasks now in the onboarding task button. If we hit refresh, we'll see that 1 succeeded and 1 is still running. And if we hit refresh again, okay, great. 2 devices got created, CSR1, let me resort it, CSR1 and CSR2. Let's go ahead and explore CSR1. Again, it's in the site we designated for Denver. But other than this, look at all this information that the onboarding plugin discovered. The device type, the serial number, the network. Excuse me, it assigned the role for network. The platform is Cisco IOS. And if we click on the device type for CSR 1000V, the manufacturer is Cisco. The plugin created that manufacturer as well, so it knew enough to do that much. So again, a wealth of information got created by the onboarding plugin for this single device. And when all we did was give it the site and IP address to go off of. The onboarding plugin did all the rest of this data. Great. So we're going to move on now to another onboarding example. The next device type we're going to onboard is a Cisco NX-OS device. And before we get into the onboarding itself, I want to explain a couple things around Napalm and Cisco NX-OS. Napalm has 2 drivers that will interact with NX-OS. The first one is the NX-OS SSH driver, and then the other one is the NX-OS driver, which you use if you're running NX API on the NX-OS platform. What I'm going to show you an example of right now is Napalm using the NX-OS SSH driver. So let's go ahead and go to Plugins. And in this drop-down here, right by onboarding tasks, you see this plus sign here. This allows you to go directly to a single onboarding task. So let's go ahead and do that. So the site here is going to be Singapore, and the IP address is going to be NX-OS Spine 1. You can go ahead and leave all this other information blank here. It'll all default normally. And let's go down and hit create. And if we refresh a few times here, we'll see the process in action. The process is still running. Let's go ahead and refresh again. And the process has succeeded. Let's go ahead and take a look at the device we just created. Go to Devices, and there it is, NX-OS Spine 1. Again, look at all the information we have here. Site, which we added, which we specified, but all the rest of this information, device type, serial number, the role, the platform, this was all discovered by by the device onboarding plugin, okay? And if we go again to device type, if we click on that, the manufacturer is Cisco, which the onboarding plugin also populated. So now we've onboarded a third type of device, the Cisco NX-OS running SSH. Next, we're going to cover how to onboard a Cisco NX-OS platform running NX API. The next device type we're going to talk about onboarding is a Cisco NX-OS device running the NX API endpoint. In order to do that, we need to manually create the NX API platform in Nautobot. So I'll walk you through how to do that right now. So if you go to Devices, Platforms, and then this is our list of platforms right now. We will go ahead and add. We'll configure a platform with the following attributes here. We'll give it a name. We can just say Cisco NX-OS API. And now this is very important. The slug has to be NX-OS. It can't be anything else. So it defaulted to something different when we gave it a name, but you need to override that to make sure the slug says NX-OS explicitly. And then the napalm driver, you need to explicitly type in NX-OS as well. From there, you can go ahead and hit create. And now we have a driver called we have a platform called Cisco NX-OS API, which runs the NX-OS napalm driver. From here, we can go ahead and if we go to plugins, we can go to onboarding task, and we can go ahead and just hit add here. And we can select a site. We can say NX-OS Spine 2 for our IP address. And in this case, by default, the API, NX API, will be running on port 443. So we'd override the default port and say port 443. And then we would go down and explicitly select the platform, Cisco NX-OS API. So if we can make this a little bit easier to see here, this is what we would do. Site, the IP address as before. We would override the port with whatever port we're running the NX API on. In this case, we're running on 443. And then you need to explicitly choose Cisco NX-OS API as the platform. And then you come down here and hit create. Now, unfortunately, my lab setup does not allow me to run the NX API, so I can't complete this exercise here, but this is how it would be done. First, manually create the platform, and then create the device with these explicit add-ons, the port, and then the platform. And on to the next device onboarding. For this example, we're going to onboard an Arista EOS platform. Now, like with the NX-OS API platform, you need to take steps to build the platform in Nautobot. And once you've done that, you can use it many, many times. So let's go ahead and build the device platform in Nautobot right now for Arista EOS. So we go to Devices on the drop-down menu, click on Platforms, go ahead and Add. Okay, and we'll name this, it can be whatever you want. We'll name it Arista EOS. Now the slug must be Arista _EOS. Again, Arista _EOS. That has to be the slug. So you'll have to manually override what it populates there. And then with the napalm driver, it must be EOS. So with that, we've created the Arista EOS platform. Now go ahead and hit create, and there we go. Now we can use this platform to onboard Arista devices. Now that we have that EOS platform defined, let's go ahead and use it during a device onboarding for an Arista EOS device. So as before, go up to plugins in the dropdown. Under device onboarding, you can just hit the plus to open up a single onboarding task. For this example, we'll do Denver. For the IP address, we'll do EOS Leaf 1 is my DNS name. For Arista, you need to specify the port that EOS is using for HTTPS. By default, it's going to be 443, I believe, so we'll use that here. And then the second thing, under platform, you need to manually select Arista EOS. Okay, so just to recap, we specified the explicit port that HTTPS is running on for Arista, and we specified the explicit platform Arista EOS because it won't auto-detect that. Now, with all that, we can go ahead and hit create, and it succeeded. Awesome. Let's go ahead and take a look at the device. There's EOS Leaf 1 here. And let's take a look and see what we have here. We have the site which we specified, the device type, which is Arista VEOS. The serial number was not detected for this Arista. The role has been auto-populated as network. The platform is Arista EOS, which we specified. If we go into device type, click on that, the manufacturer gets created and populated as Arista. So the plugin created that manufacturer and assigned it to this device as well. Awesome. So let's go ahead and head back. Now we've onboarded an Arista EOS device through the onboarding form. Now we're going to demo programmatic onboarding of devices using Nautobot and the Nautobot onboarding plugin. Okay, what we're going to demo is programmatically onboarding a device and then checking the status of that device onboarding task to make sure that the device onboarded properly. For more information on what else you can do with the Nautobot onboarding plugin API, please see this link here. So the script that we're going to talk about will do the following. It will onboard a new device via a post to this endpoint, and then it will check on the status of that onboarding task at this next endpoint right here. And now on to it. Let's go over and cover some key parts of the script we're gonna execute here. We're gonna do a few things. Let's first focus on the URL. Here is the endpoint we're gonna post to. So this first part here is just our URL for the server. Then the second part is the endpoint we're going to post to right here. The payload is going to include the same information that we have during an onboarding task, explicitly the site and the IP address. And because we're going to onboard an Arista EOS device, we have to also specify the port right here and the port right here, and the platform, which is going to be Arista EOS. And right here it would be Arista EOS. So if I just do this, and I think we're doing it to Bangkok, and the IP address is EOS spine 1. This information I have here in the payload of the script is the exact information specified in the onboarding task right here. So there's that. The headers, we're going to use an authentication header. We're going to go ahead and specify that here. Here is where we're going to make the post using the headers and payload. We're going to go ahead and parse some of that response. We are going to then parse this response to make sure we get a good status code to make sure we had a good post. And then once we know we have that, we're going to create a new URL to do a get to. So that URL is going to be the URL we have defined above, plus we're going to parse this response data for the specific ID. Then we're going to do the request get, and then we're going to convert to JSON and grab the status. And we're going to keep checking the status until it's not running anymore or we have more than 10 attempts. So without further ado, I will go ahead and just run this script. And before I do that, let's just go to devices and take a look at all the devices we have right now. And then let's go ahead and run the script. Oh, great. Okay, great. Now EOS Spine 1 should be here in our device inventory now. So if we go ahead and refresh, here's EOS Spine 1. Okay, that concludes the demo of programmatically using the device onboarding plugin with Nautobot to programmatically onboard your devices. And what now? So you've used Nautobot device onboarding plugin to add basic device information into Nautobot. One possible next step might be to leverage that basic information in Nautobot for each device, such as the IP address and platform information, to allow something like Ansible or a Python script to programmatically use that information to access the same network devices and retrieve additional information from each device and put that more sophisticated information into Nautobot. Things such as the interface information, the interface description, IP addresses, programmatically retrieve all that from the network and populate that into Nautobot for each device. That is one possible next step. And this concludes our walkthrough and demo of the Nautobot device onboarding plugin. Thank you for your time and have a great day.